At Pace University, where my fiance works, a pigeon drama has been unfolding. It began with one of the campus buildings, where on the second floor there is a large window with a wide ledge. Now, pigeons love this window and this wide ledge. They love the shelter that it offers, where they can avoid rain in the summer and snow in the winter. They love the warmth of the heat vent that's right by it. They love, I'm sure, the view. Maybe for the aesthetics, I don't know, but I'm sure to be able to see the potential threats from people or hawks from far away. But this ideal paradise for these pigeons was not to last. While the pigeons were enjoying their spot, the facilities managers of Pace University were having a very different experience. They saw how dirty the pigeons were making everything. There were droppings on the ledge, the chaos of fluttering wings, the potential damage to the building structure itself. They were sharing none of the pigeons' joy. So one day, Pace made their move. Netting appeared over the ledge and the window. It was tied tight so that no pigeon could get in. It was a smart move, non-confrontational, relatively non-invasive. All they had to do was shoo away the pigeons and put the netting up. Before the pigeons knew what was happening, their favorite spot was gone. For a while, it seemed like that was that. The pigeons took residence in other spots along the street, finding gaps in the architecture vulnerable to their perching. But one morning, the university found holes in the netting, and the pigeons were back. It was unclear whether the pigeons mobilized a response to the netting and made the holes themselves, or whether it happened in some other mysterious way. Regardless, though, they squeezed in between the gaps and made them even wider, making a mess of the materials. Perhaps they were even happier now, as the remaining netting was a natural protection for them once they were inside. Much harder for a hawk to get in, and even gave them some shade. The university, though, was not beaten yet. Within a few days of the netting being broken through, 3 plastic owls appeared on the ledge. You've seen them, I'm sure, around the city, about this high, brown and black imitations designed to trick and intimidate animals into thinking that there is an apex predator right there on that ledge. Independent of these pigeons, the first consequence of the owls going up was that almost every human being, according to my fiance, was startled. For almost a day or so, it was the topic of conversation for students and staff and faculty, all of a sudden who were looking up at 3 large birds of prey, staring right down at them. I guess they were hard to see from below. The pigeons left the ledge for a few days. We will never know if they were legitimately concerned about the owls or just unsettled by the intrusion of human beings in their space. And then mysteriously, one of the owls was found fallen from its perch. A few days later, a second owl was broken, this time overturned with some violent force. The pigeons left the final owl stay. They have now been seen sleeping next to it, cozying up next to it, surrounding it with their bodies as if to show just how silly the whole thing is. We don't know how the university will respond. So far, they seem to have admitted defeat, unable to stop the relentless determination of the pigeon flock that calls that ledge home. This spring, many of those pigeons have even made their nests there, with little ones poking their heads up and out as they grow and ask for food. Now, I completely understand why the university began its feud with these birds. Pigeons are not the most popular animal around the city. Complaints about them are numerous. They are everywhere. They get in their way, they can be aggressive with food. Their gray, dark feathers make them a perfect complement in the concrete and tar and grime that pervades city life. That's why some people call them derogatorily the rats of the sky. For some, they are a nuisance. For most of us, they are tolerated, or often just blend into the already congested cityscape where we live. If we needed a symbol of an animal that is underappreciated, ignored, or a source of arbitrary irritation, the pigeon would be it. Now, I've had pigeons in my life too. Before living in New York, before moving here, I lived on the second floor of a duplex. It was in a city, but not like this one. For about 1 month, one spring, I would hear cooing noises outside as I cooked breakfast and dinner. At first, it was just ambient noise, the kind you didn't really notice. When the cooing was matched with little chirps, I started to wonder what it was. It was a sweet noise, a warble that seemed less planned but more like a cat's purr, emanating from some feeling within. Eventually, I went outside to investigate, and sure enough, on that ledge, to the left of my kitchen window, was a nest. From within the mixture of sticks and grass and straw, I could see a little head poking up from above. It looked at me, as I'm sure it looked at me many times without me knowing, perhaps this time recognizing that for the first time, I was looking back. The pigeon had a home outside my window. The cooing that had been so present was from a mother to its children, perhaps a form of reassurance or even love. The chirps, their reply. It was for a few months that I and this pigeon shared a home. I never saw the chicks or anything beyond the mother's head poking up, looking down at me from above. But I like to think that we became friends. That just like I came to enjoy their daily conversations back and forth, finding comfort and joy in their presence near me, that they too came to know me in their own pigeon way, my patterns, my voices, my footsteps. Here in this city where we live, such an experience is harder to imagine. Among so many millions of pigeons, it's hard to appreciate the life of a single bird. There are over 1 million pigeons in New York, and here I don't get to hear pigeons peacefully cooing to one another. All I see is them swarming, or a lot of pecking and scrambling and flying off to get out of my way. This is inherently a part of city life, but it can also be dehumanizing of life when we are confronted with so much of it. Individuals become numbers. We experience the collective, but not the uniqueness behind each individual being. We can get overwhelmed by it, unable to take it all in. That's not necessarily our fault, but how our nature forms us. Who pays attention to a single blade of grass, or appreciates one dandelion as it grows? I imagine that my little pigeon family would have gotten lost in the crowd here, like all the rest, and yet I was lucky enough to have a chance to know them. I think it is one of our principal challenges, living in a world with so much going on and so many lives on this planet, to not lose sight of the beauty and brilliance and sacredness of it all. To honor and hold the vastness and enormity of this world, but understand that we need to connect with it on a smaller scale for it to mean as much as it should. It's much easier to love one pigeon family who you hear and know and live with than a flock of anonymous creatures in the street. It can be easy to look past these individual lives of all who live alongside us. That's true for people as well as with pigeons. That each one of these million pigeons in this city is living its life fully, that each has its story, each was hatched, grew up despite the odds, that each has routine and relationships in their own way, a life that is vivid and interesting and real, as much for them as it is for us. It is sometimes only when something forces us to stop and pause, to see the value in one rather than many, that we can appreciate the beings in front of us. Sometimes it takes the risk of losing them before we're snapped into awareness. I'm reminded of a story of a being named Booming Ben, perhaps at his time the most famous bird in the world. Ben was not a pigeon, but he shared certain qualities with them. He was what was called a heath hen, a kind of northeastern prairie chicken. For much of American history, everybody knew about heath hens. They were everywhere. They were a huge source of food in the early American colonies and were so common that servants would complain to their employers that they're getting too much of it, 3 or 4 times a week, meals of heath hens. They were sometimes annoying in mating season because when they were mating, the males would make this deep booming call, searching for its mate that would disrupt everyone who was nearby. But this would not last. Over the course of the 19th century, the heath hen population suffered. Urbanization, agriculture, overhunting, a series of natural disasters reduced their population drastically. By the turn of the 20th century, there was only a few hundred heath hens left in the world, all clustered in what they thought was safety on Martha's Vineyard. The population had a brief explosion in the 1920 up to 600, and then a series of fires and a pandemic of feral cats reduced them even further. By 1927, there were 13 left. And then by 1928, there was just one. That was Booming Ben. Booming Ben, of course, did not know any of this. He did not know the history of his species. He did not know about the overhunting or the fires or the cats, about the servants or the frantic efforts by conservationists to save his species from extinction. He did not know that when he woke up each morning and walked from his home on a farm to a clearing nearby, that he was the only heath hen left. He did not know when he performed his morning mating dance, each morning when he called out and chirped and ended it with his trademark boom, all to attract another of his kind, that no one would answer. Each morning for 4 years, Ben would rise and perform this ritual to the world. We can imagine this little being waking up with such great determination each and every day, holding within its heart some unrealized hope and expectation. The innocent assumption that someday someone would appear out of the woods next to his grass, that someone would appear glad to see him and join him for his dance. Ben remained undeterred to the end, even in his loneliness, even in his yearning for companionship. He remained undeterred till one day he made his final walk into that clearing, made his one last boom, and never returned. Ben's life is now largely forgotten. But at the time, his story, both tragic and a reminder of resiliency and courage, from even the most unlikely among us, it gripped the news. People came from all over the world to see him in those 4 years, to watch his lonely ritual. Now, Booming Ben's story is a story of awareness. It's a bell reminding us. It's a cautionary tale, of course, about the impact of the earth and its creatures. But it also says something important about who and what we value. No one, I think, would have said that Booming Ben's life wasn't important. We feel for him. We are moved by his story and his plight, his loneliness, his undaunted desire for connection. We admire it in him. Over the course of his life, Booming Ben became sacred to the world in his own bird way. Yet we have to ask, why did he have to become the very last of his kind to matter? His life should have been just as sacred, even if he was one of millions. His life would have been special and unique and just as real. He shouldn't have needed us to notice him to give his life value. He already had it. The same should be true for our pigeon friends. Each has inherent worth and dignity, even when they are all over the place and in the way. In another world, one of the 1 million pigeons among us could be the Booming Ben. They are not so much different, and we would have loved that one for it. So why not make sure we love them now? It should not make a difference what one's story is, or if we are the only one of many or lost in a crowd. Because the value of a life, whether pigeon or person, is in its being. If we can get past the noise, we can see with new eyes and open ourselves to this truth. Open ourselves to kindness to all life, humility of our own place in the universe, towards the lives of others. We will find that our own heart expands. We will find that our own world, interior, in our hearts, and out there, becomes more vibrant and intimate and colorful and full of life. We might find that we too, overlooked at times, lonely at times, disrespected at times, find comfort when our individual beauty is seen and celebrated. This is a gift that extends to all of us, each and every one. It is a grace that we can share. In a world where life is cheap and degraded, where so many of us are considered inconsequential and unimportant, we must make sure that we affirm the goodness, the value, and the beauty of all. Our lives must not be limited in loving, nor should we see value and beauty as commodities to be scarcely given. Instead, live as if your life is overflowing with love for the world and all those within it. Whether for pigeons or people, blades of grass, may all things be well and have their beauty seen. The world will be better for it, and I think so will all of we. Amen.